Hey, Jess, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks.
We are going to talk a little bit about the role of a school-based mental health counselor, and I'd love to get a little introduction to you and how you got where you are.
Yeah, so I am a licensed clinical social worker, and I work for North Lakes Community Clinic, which covers kind of the northern half of Wisconsin, very rural. And I got into this, I think mainly because I just wanted to help people, and specifically people going through trauma. And I ended up doing school-based things when I was working with a large youth population in a day treatment and outpatient clinic, and really just seeing that need of how many kids could use services that can't access them. And so working with the local school districts to try to open up that access. And I really just fell in love with it and the whole model. And, there's a few drawbacks, but overall, it's been such a rewarding type of service to get out there. So it's just kind of grew and grew. And now I'm the director of our school-based services here. So
Awesome. Yeah, I always think of schools as one of kind of like the broadest nets we can cast in terms of like catching needs that are existing.
mhm.
So yeah, awesome. What would you say is the objective of the role of a school-based mental health counselor?
I would say there's probably two main goals to be a school-based provider. I think the first, and I guess they're interchangeable, not necessarily in order, but one of them would be to offer the same quality services that you would provide in the clinic, but getting that to the kids at the school. So quality services. And the second would be increasing access. On average, we attend an appointment at a clinic. Like, in order to attend an appointment at a clinic, it requires 2 to 3 hours out of the parents' day or the guardian's day and the student's day away from school. And that takes a really big toll when that student needs to be seen every week or every other week. So if we can cut that down to 30 minutes or 45 minutes out of that week, it nearly eliminates it for the parent if they don't have to miss work or any of the travel time. And the travel cost involved is eliminated. We are making a significant impact on improving access to mental health services for kids. So those would be the main objectives, I think: access and quality.
Yeah, awesome. Really like eliminating barriers to increase access. Yeah.
Yeah.
And how would you describe how a school-based mental health counselor would spend their day?
It will depend a little bit based on how the agency sets up the day. But typically, sessions are held during regular class times at the school with the bell schedule. So a session for the middle school or high school kid could be 42 minutes or 48 minutes or up to 55 minutes, depending on that class period. And then for elementary kids, we usually do a half hour, but we might go up to 45 minutes. And we try to align that with their classroom schedule when there's a natural transition. And I would have a lot to say on how you spend the day, because another main goal of that is to keep those appointments pretty consistent. So there's not just for the students, but the teachers and also the providers. So everyone knows what to expect. We aren't mucking around with things. They don't know if it's today, if it's tomorrow, if it's the morning, if it's the afternoon, when that student's going to be out of the classroom. So keeping that pretty consistent, and then that allows us as a provider to know when do we have time to reach out to parents, when do we have time to consult with other teachers or the principal or whomever. So I usually, when I get to the school, I reach out to parents. My agency allows us to have a work cell phone number, and so I'll send a text to all of my parents. Hey, how's it going? Any updates? I need to update their treatment plan. Do you have thoughts on this goal? Those kinds of things. And hopefully they'll respond throughout the day and I'll get some bit of an update. And then I just pull up in my chart and start seeing kids based on that order that we arrive at. And at the end of the day is when we tend to do our documentation or more phone calls to parents or attend an IEP meeting or things like that. So because the bell schedule sometimes allows for 2 minutes between sessions, where in the clinic you might get 10 to 15 minutes between sessions, a lot of that time is consolidated at the end to get a bunch of those notes done and those kinds of things.
Yeah, and that totally makes sense if the school day goes until roughly 3 o'clock, that those 3 to
Yeah.
5 p.m. hours when most people are working anyway are more for
Yeah.
office-based stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, or a family session if that's when the parent could come in, but they couldn't come in at 9:12 when your session was. They can come then. So that end of day allows for a lot of options for how you can use it.
Awesome. What would you say the education path looks like or preparation path looks like for someone interested in this type of career?
I think it would be the same as it would be for the clinic. A lot of master's programs include kid-based things, so diagnosis or differential diagnosis for kids, engaging with parents, groups are definitely an option at the school. And a lot of master's programs do a really good job of including, all ages in how to treat that for mental health. If, of course, yours didn't, well, then getting some extra training on how to do kid-based mental health. You do not have to have play therapy. That's a common misconception, is that people have to be certified in play therapy or they have to do all of these extra huge certifications on child and adolescent mental health. You don't need to. Unless you don't feel comfortable or competent in approaching that, then by all means get all of that training. Otherwise, the paths that are led to get your licensed professional counselor, licensed marriage and family therapist, or licensed clinical social worker, those all do just fine. They do great.
Yeah, and with those three kind of different tracks people might take towards school-based mental health, you said professional counselor, marriage and family therapist, or social worker.
Clinical social worker. Yep.
Clinical social worker, thank you. Are those typically a master's program that someone would take after an undergraduate degree?
Yes. Yep. And there's a bunch of different titles out there for what those master programs are. A master's in counseling or a master's in marriage therapy, or, mine was just a master in social work, but with a clinical specialty or clinical track. So that's an important piece, or you will not qualify for a licensure as mental health. So, and then, the time involved in that is really dependent on how fast your track is. So typically 4-year bachelor degree, most commonly in psychology or social work or sociology. And then however long your master's is, a lot of them are 2 years. But if you do part-time, that might stretch out. And then just the time involved in getting your in-training license. So a lot of people who work in school-based mental health are LPCIT, like the licensed professional counselor in training, or an APSW, or those kinds of things. And that's very doable. That shouldn't deter anybody from thinking they can't do it because they don't have their full independent license. There's lots of supervision out there for that. So
Yeah, and so I'm hearing that after an undergraduate degree, there's a master's degree, and then after that, someone is actually able to earn money while they're getting their licensure.
yes. So while the internship might not be a paid internship, or it's paid in experience, the once you graduate with your master's and you apply for your in-training license, you often have to, have an employer. So that could be the other catch in some time frame there, is finding an employer that will hire and take on an in-training LPC or LMFT or social worker or something. And then those are paid salaries. You don't have to work that 2 years and get all those hours as unpaid by any means. And oftentimes your supervision that's required during that in-training period, your employer will provide.
Awesome. So paid on the job training.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think of it as a really good, both the in-training license experience and if you can get an internship somewhere, even if it's not paid, are really good, like reverse interviews for you to see, is this the type of agency I want to work for, whether it's a nonprofit or a for-profit or a private or whatever it is. But also a really good time to try out different things to see what fits for you.
And how would you describe, generally speaking, like the job prospects? I know you might be most familiar with in Wisconsin specifically, but what's it looking like?
I would say the demand for it is huge. And so there are tons of places with open positions that are looking to hire both in training and fully licensed people, even if you don't have a ton of experience working with kids. They will help build those skills. So I would say it is a very abundant in terms of open positions and options, both rural and urban.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely there's a bit of a shortage going on, so people are in demand.
Yes.
Yeah. And how about range of compensation for a school-based counselor or just even a counselor in general?
Yeah. So a common answer in mental health is it depends. And that definitely applies here, where, if you are working for a nonprofit or federally qualified health center in a rural community, you're probably not going to make as much as you would for a for-profit agency in a larger city. But I would say easily 55,000 would be a decent starting point. It might be a little bit less than that for in training. And then as you get your fully independent license, then you generally get a nice pay raise. And I think that applies the same for both in clinic and school based. And a lot of positions are a combination. You do not have to only do school based. So I do a day or two in the schools, depending on the year and the need. And the rest of my time is here in the clinic where I see all ages. I'll throw in a couple here and there and get a nice variety. Some people really want school-based only, and so that might alter that pay a little bit because school-based only providers are harder to find. Most of us want a little variety in our day. So it depends, but some providers make 75,000, 80,000, and again, depending on what type of agency you work for. And what your personal mission is and how that fits with those agencies. So some people really do not like working for profit agencies. They'd rather work for a nonprofit, and there's perks and downfalls of that. Usually one is that you don't make as much, but for nonprofits or federally qualified health centers, there is a loan forgiveness program that most of those places can qualify for. So it isn't the agency you work for that repays your loan. It's the agency you work for that meets certain criteria that allows you to qualify for a loan forgiveness program. So we've had providers have $90,000 of student debt wiped. And that's pretty huge. So while your salary might not be as much as it could be if you work in the city or for, for-profit agencies, they don't qualify a lot of times for those programs. So there's a little bit of a payoff, but I don't know, a $90,000 extra income to me would be pretty worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing a little bit about loan forgiveness as well.
Yeah.
That's super interesting to incorporate into the conversation about reimbursement.
Mm-hmm. We're often asked that when we're interviewing providers is, do we have them? Yeah, there's a lot of agencies out there that do, and it's so nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you so much for talking a little bit about this position today. Is there anything you want to share before we wrap up?
I think maybe just a few of the benefits of the position that I like to talk about. And it depends a little bit on your philosophy. And I hit on it a bit, that really that access. So the number of kids, it's one of the main perks that I like about it, is all of those kids that I see in my day, there's a fraction of them that would actually get to the clinic. So the impact that we have on our youth to help prevent those mental health struggles developing into some scary things as adults is one of the biggest perks. And that they can apply what you're doing in session immediately. They leave your room and they are immediately back into their school setting, in their social networks, and they can practice those social skills or that assertive communication or following through with their homework and getting those grades up, whatever it is, compared to 3 hours later or the next day if they come to the clinic. But one of the downfalls is kind of the speed of it. So like I said before, that you might only have 2 minutes in between sessions and the parent isn't there. So sometimes school-based isn't the best fit for a kid, and having to have that conversation with the family that the struggle would be better addressed through family sessions, including like our 5 and 6-year-old kids. There's only so much we can do individually because really it's the system we have to work with within that family system specifically. So I like to point those things out to people so they kind of know what they're getting into. It's a little bit faster paced. You don't have those parents right there, and you have to be a little bit more creative in how to get that parent engagement. But it's so worth it because these kids would just never have it.
Yeah, and I imagine the ability to connect with school staff as well about what's coming up for some of the kids and partnering on their needs might be a
Yeah,
benefit.
they spend the vast majority of their awake day at school. And so to be in that environment and being able to collaborate, as long as parents allow it, collaborate with those school staff about the student and their struggles and to help them problem solve and practice things, or to hand the students off after a really hard session and say, hey, they might be coming in a little bit emotional, give them a few minutes, or could you check in on them, later in the day because I won't be able to be able to create that team around them in an environment that they're in for more time than they're at home, which is kind of sad, is also really powerful and harder to do from an outpatient clinic setting.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being here today to talk about your passion for school-based mental health.
Yeah, thanks.
Um, yeah, thank you.